shoot. I left the la mesa afuera. Yeah, sí, sí.
Sí, no, espera, Nieves. El pinga, que se ha dejado el pinganillo en la mesa de... Bueno, vamos empezando. Mientras traen el pinganillo que falta, pero todo bien. Gracias a todas y a todos por venir, por haber visto los Nickel Boys, los chicos de la Nickel. I'm speaking right now, and so... Sí, además, RaMell Ross nos decía que habla un poco de español. ¿Puedes saludar?
Hola, gracias por
¿Venir?
Sí.
Bueno, ya habéis visto la película, es una película fantástica, tiene 2 nominaciones a los Oscar, a Mejor Película y a Mejor Guión, y está basada en la novela de Colson Whitehead, ganadora del premio Pulitzer en 2020, que además contaba pues, una historia real, unos hechos reales que ocurrieron, que salieron en la prensa y que el escritor pues, los utilizó para crear esta ficción que ahora RaMell Ross ha adaptado al cine. Vamos a empezar, si te parece, voy a empezar en inglés, me voy a lanzar. Vamos a ver cómo hacemos esto. Quería preguntarte, the first question, have you read the book before learning about a film adaptation?
No.
No.
I got the book, I think 2 months before it came out, and... Lo siento. Un momento, por favor. Más bueno. Yeah, I got the book 2 months before it came out, and then, you know, kind of fell in love with the imagination space and asked a friend of mine, Jocelyn Barnes, to co-write with me.
Y que tú habías hecho documentales, tú vienes de la fotografía, vienes del mundo académico y te metes en la ficción con esta historia. ¿Qué tiene esta historia para que te llegue de tal manera que digas, va a ser mi primera película de ficción, me meto en este proyecto y me meto a adaptar un libro como Los chicos de la Nickel?
Yeah, the book like overlapped with, it had space for my artistic practice. The ideas that are the form of the film and the ideas that are the fundamental inner workings of each individual image come from my photographic explorations over the course of around 15 years in the historic South. And reading Colson's book, I realized that there was a way to populate an archive that is missing, that didn't exist, with images of people of color, you know, Black folks in the States, that are poetic and open-ended and experiential, for all the reasons why we know the relationship between the camera and people of color globally is fraught with the view of, in the Eurocentric imaginary, I guess.
Y creo que todas y todos habréis visto, igual que cuando yo vi la película por primera vez, que una de las cosas más sorprendentes o más diferentes es la adopción del punto de vista. Está contada en primera persona, cambia 3 veces ese punto de vista. ¿En qué momento, es verdad que la novela juega también con los puntos de vista, en qué momento decides que hay que contarlo así, que hay que poner la cámara en ese lugar? Vamos a empezar por ahí.
Yeah, the point of view is central to the political gesture, which is giving life to the Dozier School boys, giving subjectivity to Black characters. And Colson plays with point of view, but the book itself is written in third person. Mm-hmm. And so it's still, one would imagine, an adaptation would be third-person camera, which is the audience, you all watching the characters in their world, and you kind of fundamentally being separate, or voyeur. And after reading the book, I connected so strongly with the 2 main characters. I couldn't help but see myself in the story, and the way that I make images and the way in which I shot this other film, Hell County, this evening, it was essentially first person. And so one wonders then, you know, how can we just have one less layer of abstraction from the audience to the characters? And then also, how can you, if you make the camera an organ, like if you bring the camera into the body so that your experience is simultaneous with theirs, what happens when, you're disembodied? What happens when you go through trauma? Like perhaps the camera becomes outside of the body if it starts inside the body. And the perspective swapping was as much about developing a cohesive narrative with the form, but also exploring the way in which the two characters could only see each other, which is just something that is a deep product of self-revelation for individuals, a relationship with another.
Y hablabas de que el punto de vista es una elección política, siempre lo es. No sé si en esta película quizá más, porque hay otra decisión importante que es que desde ese punto de vista que cuenta la historia no vemos la violencia. La violencia está, la conocemos, sabemos que hay torturas, crímenes, violaciones, sin embargo la cámara no enfoca eso. Al revés, enfoca pequeños detalles. ¿Por qué decides dejar fuera toda esa violencia?
Yeah, so my ideas and political ideas in relationship to the camera are very American ideology. Like I say America's visual constitution. And I think those gestures overlap with the way in which the camera has been used globally. So I say that in that there is this philosopher, I always butcher his name, but I'm sure you all have heard of him. His name is Slavoj Žižek.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce his
it's
name
like,
neither.
I don't even know if he does because he's,
Zizek, Kikek, I don't know.
I don't know. Z-E-Z-E. Okay, just kidding. I really love the guy. But he has this essay called A Holiday from History. And in it, he says, and pardon if you've heard me say this, I really like to say it because it explores like very specifically the way that the U.S. it produces its view of itself. He asks in the essay, you guys remember 9/11, talking to us or talking to whoever, how horrible it was, like people jumping from buildings, bodies in the street, like limbs. Any person that was there remembers the gore. Like they remember how viscerally horrific. And then he asked, how many of those images have you seen? And that was the first time I kind of questioned the way in which I'd been shown my own country, specifically from the news, as it doesn't relate to people of color, though I will get to that eventually. But like we didn't see those images because they wouldn't show them. But for people, like for a tragedy that happens in Mexico or in the Congo, like all over the front page, like dead bodies and gore and limbs, like what does that say that we're not allowed to see images of us, but we are seeing images of the others? It's like it happens to them, but not us. And as it relates to the camera and people of color, we see the images of people of color being abused historically. It's been part also of the process of civil rights and trying to show that, these injustices do exist. So it had a purpose, but it became the only index, the only image, the majority image of people of color disseminated to the world and disseminated to our own selves and the population. And so for this film, it seemed like we already had the ideas and the images in our heads. Like they exist. All anyone needs to do is see a person of color laying on the street, and you think that. If you see a not person of color thinking on the street or lying on the street, you may not go there right away. It's just a little different, Black skin, I like to say black skin is content, It's its own narrative. And so aside from that, which I think is the most important reason, if you're going to take very seriously the idea of point of view, of making the camera an organ, you have to ask then, when trauma happens, what happens to the gaze? Like what happens to one's eyes? I've been injured from playing sports many a times. Never am I, after I break my foot, I'm not like getting a good angle, like, whoa. I'm like looking away, twiddling my thumbs. I'm on to details. We don't look at the horror because we're trying to survive it. And so it made no sense,
Y esto me hace pensar en, hay otro libro del autor de Colston Whitehead, El ferrocarril subterráneo, que lo adaptó Barry Jenkins. Y Barry Jenkins tiene otra manera de hacer.
Oh, the Underground Railroad?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
No. y la manera de adaptarlo sí que es distinta en el caso de Barry Jenkins. No sé si habéis hablado, habéis discutido cómo hacerlo y si de alguna manera el trabajo que él ha hecho de adaptación te ha servido de algún modo.
Well, it did. It did, very much so. And so there's one thing that the film is trying to do, and I imagine you have questions or someone has questions about the archive in it, the historical images that are in it, is it's trying to make clear or to explore the relationship between the way in which people are visualized over time and the way in which people are treated, right? Like in order for the Dozier School boys, the Nickel boys to be killed, like murdered, abused, people have to see them a certain way. Like it's visual as well as it is ideological. And so within that, there's a trajectory of visualization of people of color that is tied to cinema, that is tied to news, that is tied to the history of photography, that is tied to all these different ways in which human beings are interacting with the camera and the lens. And I think that what Barry Jenkins did is at the height of the arc. It's at the top because the way that he made the images painterly, the way that those images have a certain amount of production, high quality production, a certain amount of care, amount of like emotive light quality, like all of these, maybe conceptual notions around art, it had not been done before. Like that's the height. Now, I could not go do better than that, like I don't know what was next for me was, okay, now that we've given it everything that we can in terms of thinking about his artistic possibility maybe, in terms of its visualization, at least from the way that my brain works, I can't participate in that because I can't extend that, I can only reproduce that. So I'll do my version of it, which is absent, and have it be aural and sonic and, yeah.
Y hablabas de la parte visual. Es una pena que Joe Mowbray no esté nominado por la mejor fotografía, porque hace un trabajo fantástico. No sé cómo ha sido trabajar con él y repensar todo este mundo. La crítica americana, yo no conozco el sur de Estados Unidos, pero me ha parecido curioso que la crítica americana hablara de que es un sur de Estados Unidos retratado como nunca lo habían visto.
Oh, in this film?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Joe Mowbray, who is the DP, is a pretty phenomenal thinker and like a master, at least, to the extent of what I understand to be a master of light and mood. Like he can shape a scene. Like I'm a documentarian essentially. Like I make images, photography with cameras, and I can frame anything, and I know how I want to frame, but that's because it already exists out there. Like if you give me a camera, I can do it, but in order you have to build a scene with light is a completely different relationship to making art. I can do it with photography, strobes, flashes, and so Jomo also invented a couple rigs, essentially, because as you see, the way that the camera is moving is not something that had been done quite literally in the way in which we did it. And so Jomo needed to, with his rigging team, use equipment that's not supposed to be used as close to the human body and retrofit it in order to make it so that we could, be in, like you guys know the scene, the cane poking scene? The one I was also a camera operator, so I shot the one that's the image that's in there. I shot, but essentially all the camera operators were shooting us. We were shooting with this rig that had a remote head, and Elwood, who is Ethan Harisi, is against the wall like this, and I'm around the corner moving this piece of wood with a screen like this, and then this head is moving as the scene's happening, and Ethan's just that rig is meant to be used on top of a jib because a car is going by really fast in Batman, or in Top Gun because they're flying jets. And so to configure it for the ground, it's just a really difficult thing. So I don't know if that's what you're asking, but I was saying, yeah, Jomo is, what a treat to, it was obscene that he wasn't nominated. But also, it's America, everything's obscene, and you could never never underestimate people to vote against not only the things that they actually like or the things that are actually moving, but vote against their interest, because they're or we are like undereducated and creatures of the moment, you know?
También me gustaría que nos contaras, porque, claro, ¿cómo ha sido escribir el guión? El guión sí está nominado al Oscar. ¿Cómo ha sido escribir el guión con esa precisión de detalle para contar? Bueno, hay escenas donde apenas se dice nada, pero hay muchas cosas que el espectador ve, muchos pequeños detalles, la plancha, muchísimas cosas. Me gustaría que nos contaras cómo se configura un guión así.
Well, I will say, it's funny because I wrote with my co-partner, Jocelyn Barnes, but, I made up all the images because it's like the way that I'm a visual thinker. And if you all have seen a film that I made called Hale County this evening, it's like deeply visual. And the idea is to have images that have a minimum of 3 different sites for meaning, so that they're a metaphor, they're symbolic, and then they're also experiential, which means that they're neither of those. They're whatever you get from it. And that process and so when people talk about the favorite images, they talk about one of the images that Jocelyn made up, which was the iron. And it's like, I think halfway through production, we're realizing that we need more Elwood childhood and we need one more reflection. And we didn't want to use the typical reflections. And Jocelyn just comes up with the iron. We have our second unit, camera operator, Sam Ellison, go shoot it in a separate room while Jomo and I are working on another one. And then it's just like the greatest thing ever, But the details of the image are, the film is written visually. Like Jocelyn and I sit down and we're like, okay, image of Elwood, something I did as a child. Image of Elwood lying down, looking up at the ceiling with a balloon, with it sliding through his fingers, and it slowly going up to the fan. And then all of a sudden it hits the fan and it gets pushed. And then, so how do we make that image both narrative and not narrative? Oh, what is he listening to? Well, maybe there's something on the TV. Okay, then he can look at the TV. So then when we're writing the image, we're like, Elwood, as Elwood like watches the thin string slide between his fingers, the balloon slowly ascends, and then seemingly spontaneously, it hits the fan blade, which sends a jolt into the visual field, and Elwood hears something of importance to the left because this was on the TV, and then he looks over to the left. So it was written with camera movement in mind, and the treatment, which came before the script, was an edit of the film. So it was only images like that. And then after we had the film built out, we went and then figured out what was on the TV. We want this to be on the TV because that's going to relate to the space race and then MLK. And then that's going to make this. And then you start to like build it out with the language.
Wow. Y hay una cosa también muy curiosa. Es una película que, habla de un caso real, como decíamos, y a la vez tienen muchas partes metafóricas. Yo recuerdo que hablabas de los animales, de los caimanes, de qué sentido tienen los caimanes y qué significan. Contabas una historia muy bonita sobre lo que significan esos caimanes en relación con los niños negros.
Yeah. So like the images, we tried to have the film and the moments of the film not be single use. When you normally, I think in film, and I say this respectfully because it's like I speak in huge generalizations, so I don't want you all to think that I'm a scholar of most things. I'm not. I just think way too much by myself, and I just share it with you all. Thanks for that. So nothing single use. So the alligator, we wanted to have, so I came across the information that alligators in the historic South were used as, black children, young black children across the history of the historic South were used as alligator bait. And I'm like, that has to have happened maybe once or twice. There's no way that this is like a practice. And you do the research and you realize that children were stolen and or bought and they would be put on the shore, and in order to get alligator skins and meat, they would wait until the alligator either had them in their mouth or until they got close, and then they would get the alligator, and this is how they got them. And it's just like unfucking believable, right? It's like, what? So you know the postcard in the film at the end, you see it says alligator bait and there's a guy. Like, that's a real postcard. That was not something that we made. It's like this existed, and it was so normal that they had, what is that? Not paraphernalia. Merchandise. Yeah. I've never said merchandise. I've always said paraphernalia, but now I say it. Merch. They had alligator merch. Gosh, it's so dark. So, yeah. So we wanted to have the alligator in, and we're like, okay, how can we have it in so that it's just not a metaphor, or it's just not a symbol, that it's more than that? And the way in which we did it, of course, you see, is we had it be a stand-in, a sort of ephemeral stand-in for violence, or spontaneous reminder of like the Florida landscape, because it was a possible thing. Like in Florida, they do walk around like that. So it's like both of the place and both of the like system, but it's also this historical. So just like the way in which you're trying to deal with things, as you see, are like very interwoven and not single use.
Vamos a abrir el turno de preguntas para que podáis hacer las preguntas que queráis. Tenemos un micrófono, ya tenemos una. Venga, iba a hacer yo una mientras, pero no me ha dado tiempo.
Dude. Thank you for being here, and thank God there's people like you making films in the world.
Thank you.
Really, no, seriously. We've been very fortunate. We were visited by Steve McQueen before Christmas, and we had Denis Villeneuve.
Oh, I love both of them. I also love Denis.
Well,
oh, man.
I hate to say this, you and Denis have been robbed. You as well. It's not very often that we see a truly original vision that makes a film which does something which I don't think anybody's ever seen before. I think it's interesting to watch this film in a movie theater, because it's good if you can't get out.
Yeah.
There's an aspect of this film where you want to get out, and I thank you for that. I wanted to say that the other person who was robbed was your actress.
I don't know how everyone isn't just like, this is the most phenomenal performance I've seen in cinema in a long time. A minimum.
Well, we teach film acting. And to teach film, you need a Citizen Kane. Right?
Yeah.
That's a Citizen Kane of performance there. It's the performance that nobody can write and nobody can direct.
That's what I'm talking about. No, this is, I watch films, and you watch a film and you see something and you're like, how did that happen? And after making this film, as a director, I'm like, oh, I did nothing. Like ingenue, all the behavior, because you can't script that. I don't know how you're going to interact with the camera.
No.
I can't tell you to take in the birds or to scratch your face or to that's all her. Thanks for saying that. Like I really.
No,
yeah.
it's one of the most extraordinary things, and it's a great tribute to you that you just took your hands off. The film is made with. It's interesting, the concept of art. I always avoid art. I always say art is a side effect of extreme competence. In the sense that what you were doing is you were creating, because I started to read the script as well, and then I went, oh, to hell with this, because it pales in comparison to what's on screen. The power of the uninflected image, the uninflected performance, and up to and including uninflected sound and everything like that. What were the discoveries that you had when you were shooting? Such as how'd you pronounce her name?
RaMell. Me llamo?
No. The actress's name.
Oh, sorry.
No, I know.
I'm not making everything about me, guys.
No.
I'm not making everything about me.
All right,
I don't know why you guys think that.
All right. Now, how'd you write the actress's name so I don't butcher it?
Ingenue.
Ingenue. Okay. Yeah. What were the things that appeared outside, extant to the script when you were shooting it? That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. No, it's. I think I'm so appreciative of you articulating it in a way in which I never would be able to, because one, I think when I speak about Ingenue's role in the film, it comes across as me just being the director and praising her, And I'm like, you guys don't understand. So the thing that, one of the most beautiful things about this film is that the way that Ingenue inhabited Hattie, and that sort of like, you know, when she comes and gives that hug, the first one, and she's standing in the walkway, and she literally looks like she had a lobotomy. She's just like genuinely out of sorts. She was, because she read the script, we had talked, not one actor asked me about how we would shoot. I'm not going to offer that information because we have limited time. I'm not going to be like, this is what we're doing. So when we got there, it was really hard for her. She, and I didn't have much time to talk about the process because we only have her for 3 days, you know? We shot it in 28 days, no rehearsals. So I remember when we first did to answer your question with an anecdote, we did the first day is the one in which she comes to visit Elwood and has to give him the bad news of the lawyer not being there. The micro expression, the imperceptible expression on her face when she realized that the camera was not going to be on her the entire time, that she was not going to be in eye contact dialogue with Elwood after we run it the first time, and then I go back and chat with her, she was literally like ghost-faced. She was just like, fuck. You know, like, and in hindsight, chatting with her, she was like, I need people. Like, I'm a people actor. I ignore the camera. I think cameras are invasive. I can do this because I'm a theater actor, like I can act. And so the only thing I had to do was to take that isolation and that confusion and turn it and put it into the character. It made me so much more Hattie, made me so much more alone, which is why, because it always felt strange. I only had 3 days. It always felt so strange because off the camera, she seemed kind of like Hattie, you know, like a little bit like trying to figure things out. And going through all of these conversations, she like could express then that she was astray. And moments like her, when she says, look up at me, son, when Jomo's on the camera then, and Jomo ducks down to the left, she's like, look at me, son. Elwood, look at me. And then, you know, Jomo comes up. The reason why that happened is because the first time we shot it, it's not in the script, the first time we shot it, I'm on the headset with Jomo, like Jomo duck. We had planned to duck. He ducks the gaze. She's telling the story of the lawyer leaving, and she's not having Elwood look at her. The camera's not looking at her. She's delivering the most powerful lines. She spontaneously goes, smacks it like hard. I have to do it. It's like on the table, and like everyone's like, ah. And Jomo like pops up. She's like, look at me, son. And then we're like, oh, the camera needs to be responsive. Because for me and Jomo, the camera needed to be late. You know, it needed to be move like the human head a little bit. It needed to be an extension of consciousness. It needed to be the act of looking, not the scope of looking. But that it needed to be in that type of, it needed to be acting, exactly. That it needed to act was different. And that's like the something that changed everything. But that was Ingenue being an actor in the moment and doing her thing. It was so beautiful. Yeah.
Creo que tenemos otra pregunta.
Hi, congratulations as well.
Thank you.
Deeply moved still. And you can tell there's so much love behind this film from you and your crew and your cast. I'm very interested in the editing work and the music. And I mean, now I know that you come from documentary. I can tell you, I mean, it felt like a documentary, but it felt oniric. It felt, ¿cómo se dice? When you're experimental and video art. I was fascinated by it. So I don't know how much was scripted on it, how much you were experimented while editing.
Well, yeah, the editing process was the hardest. I think because, you know, I had a really clear vision of what it looked like, but to get things to get so many separate pieces to feel, and it may not even feel like, you know, some people are like, I don't understand why we're going here, like this is taking you out of the story. But for me, it feels relatively, like you said, oniric and fluid and like a consciousness or a stream or a river of images. it was quite extensive archival research, 4-year process. I have like I made this film Hell County This Morning This Evening, which I always reference because if you watch that film, then you're not surprised about this film because it has a very similar feel. The camera language is about 70% there. My hands aren't in the frame, but it's shot first person. And inside this film, it's called Hell County This Morning This Evening. While I was editing the film, this curator at MoMA named Mahendra Roy was like, hey, we found this film from 1913. It's called The Lime Kiln Film Day. This guy, Burt Williams, I'm sure he's like a famous actor in the US, black actor, quite often in blackface, just because of the times. And, we're asking a couple artists to come and see what they think about it. And I go to MoMA, I'm just like watching this film, and like this moment happens in it where I was like, whoa, that feels like it was shot like this year, like it had a little depth of field, like the framing just felt contemporary. And then I asked him if I could use it in the film. And he was like, sure. And so we put that in the film, and it just like blew my mind because it did what, like Aristotle? Aristotle, like he asked, like, what is the thickness of time, right? Like how thick is the moment? And he's talking about how much does it leak into the past and how much is it towing in a present. And making that image, placing that image beside an image that I had made, it almost created it gave you a marker for the production of black visuality. Because of the way that I was shooting, you could see, like, oh my God, like, black people have been in dialogue with in a snap. And then you go back into the film, and it changes the way you see the images. And so, this what's this, the philosopher Wittgenstein, the Tractitus guy? Sorry, I was like, say it flippantly. Yeah, average philosopher. Just kidding. He says that like the use of the meaning of a word is its use. It's not its definition, right? It's how someone uses it. And I began like, oh, it's the same thing for images. If I use these images, these archive, we're talking about the edit. I'm going into so much, the meaning of an image is its use. And so if I can abstract moments from the archive of black visuality and place them beside these images that we're creating of the Dozier Squirrel Boys, of the Nickel Boys, and then also use the archival images of the Dozier Boys, then I'm quite literally thickening time. I'm giving someone an experience of 100 years of visuality over the course of a contemporary narrative that you know well, that in which the visuality, again, is contingent, produces the way in which they're treated. It's just like a mind-blowing kind of realization. And so the editing process was trying to find those visual insights that gave you just like a sort of painterly brush of connection to something you ineffably know to be true, but you don't have time to even process the words. Do that over and over and over and over, and then you do that inside the mind of one of the characters, which is adult Elwood, which is Turner. Then he uses that to have a collapse at the end, So anyway, the editing process was crazy, but the script itself, while the script is not the film, the script is the film. Like, we have archival links, we have insert archival image, we have insert archival image of boy tripping. We have these things in here because that was a projected form, but you don't know if it's going to work or what you're going to find because the research process was so long. Yeah, and the sound's a whole nother thing, Yeah. Yeah.
Sí, tiene algo que ver con la zona de interés, ¿no? Todo lo que estabas contando también, de cambiar la narrativa y cambiar todas esas cosas. Creo que tenemos tiempo para una última pregunta. ¿Quieres repetir? ¿Quieres repetir?
Please, please.
All right, I'll project. There we go. The closest experience to this is I've had is a video game. The first person point of view and the changing first person point of view, which is extraordinary. That something so incredibly modern it finds finds its voice here. The other thing which is absolutely fascinating to me about this idea of the thickness of time, which comes back to the idea of finding this archival footage, is the concept of discovery and revelation is an important part of the film, and very much I see you there discovering it as you go along, because you're not. Are you from there?
No, not at all.
So this was also a cultural experience for you.
Well, because it's shot in New Orleans. I make all of my work in Alabama, which is close to New Orleans. There's like a southern vibe between North Florida and those spaces. Like, it's weird. I know you're not asking me to prove my ability to do the thing, but like, I don't need to, like, it's weird because a lot of folks have asked me, rightfully, if I talked to the Dozier School boys before I made the film. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, damn, I wonder if I should have. But I'm also like, I didn't even talk with Coulson before making it.
Well, there's a concept that the facts shouldn't interfere with the truth.
Yeah. I won't say anything else.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
But there's this idea of the discovery of exactly what it is, because it's terrifying. Mm-hmm. It's terrifying because it's not only a reflection of what other people can do; it's also a reflection of what we as human beings are capable of. Yeah. Acts of supreme bravery and utter cowardice, and being a despot in one way or another. Yeah. I'm very interested to know what the As you can see, we're here in Madrid. You're probably not going to find a whiter audience in the world.
It's a different type of white, though. The U.S. white. Your guy's white.
Okay, but my question is how has the reaction been to this film? Because this is a difficult film, and it's a difficult film depending on where you see this movie. How has it been? Because it deserves more nominations.
Well, I think I love that you're asking that question, because I think it's tied to the lack of nominations, in that if you read the log line, you're probably not going to watch it in the U.S. Most people don't care, and most people think they know. The U.S. is full of people who are the smartest people ever in their own heads, I'm not joking. And if they aren't, they sure think they're up there. And if they don't think they're up there, they don't care what other people think. When like black films that are made by black filmmakers, and not all of them are great, not all films are great, because a lot of them have dealt with the political aspect of being in the country, and that's been the majority. People are just check out, and they don't see them. They just don't watch them. And so the biggest challenge for this film, like, we knew that after we finished it, and we knew that, like, whoa, this is, like, people should see this formally, but also it's dealing with the topic in a fresh way. We knew that the challenge was just getting people in the theater. And still, it's still hard. We're in, it's like, it's just really disappointing, And so for those who do watch it, because a lot of people do, there's a lot of really thoughtful and intelligent people in the U.S. who are on the right side of history, if there are sides of history to be on, who go from saying that it's a profoundly moving experience to be in someone's subjectivity, which I think is one of the core attributes of the film. Also, I think one thing that's moving to them is that it elicits a subjective response, right? Like, every person has a different memory of elements of the film. This film in particular, it asks, most films, and I say this respectfully, of course, most films do the thinking for you, quite literally, in the film, and you're just like watching. This film asks you to think. And this is also why it's hard for Americans, is because if you're asked to think, then you're asked to think what you think. And what you think is a reflection of yourself. And if you actually deal with the reflection of yourself, you'll probably break the mirror, So, it's ongoing.
Pues totalmente. In Spain we have this similar problem with other films, pero eso es otra cuestión. Bueno, te vamos a agradecer muchísimo que hayas venido. Gracias por estar aquí, por presentar la película en España con este público maravilloso en la Academia de Cine, y muchísima suerte. Good luck in the Oscars.
No, thank you all for coming.